Um, well, what I'd like to talk about is something that's bothering me in the world of cinema, and that
Ooh.
is the mediocrity of the movies that have come out. And this discussion is prompted by two different things. One is Dune being as amazing as it was, and it's like, wow, when was the last time I saw a movie this good in theaters? Like, it's been years. And two, Matt, it's something that you said
Hmm.
after you watched Shang-Chi and you came onto this show. Actually, I don't know, remember if you recorded this or not, and you said Shang-Chi was a very good fantasy movie, right?
Yes.
I watched it. It's it's okay.
Okay.
It just it was
You know,
I was disappointed. I won't lie. It felt very much like just another Marvel movie. And that just made me think like, yeah, that's what we get now. We get Marvel movies, and that's pretty much it. Like we get Netflix making like literally 50 to 60 movies a year that are all utterly mediocre. And it feels to me like the more of these mediocre movies get made, the lower the bar is for what a good movie is. And all of a sudden we're talking about like these like very much B minus movies as I don't know, like art somehow. And I don't know if I'm just being a jaded hater or like I wanted to see what you guys think of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Star Wars 789, like that kind of stuff, like this, like the ending of Game of Thrones, the just like every
Yeah.
single Netflix movie that's come out. Like, have you guys seen Army of Thieves or like Army of the Dead? Like,
I saw Army
just
of the Dead. Yeah.
like that was not remotely close to a good movie to me. Like it was, and then I've heard Army of Thieves is like almost worse. So
Yeah.
I
Oh
don't,
dang, really?
it just, I
That's
feel like we're getting so many average, mediocre movies that the bar is just being lowered and lowered and lowered.
hmm
So,
which
okay. Sorry, go ahead, Kim.
I've heard like a lot because yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about this as well. How like Netflix is just kind of pumping out movie after movie after movie kind of thing, and uh, honestly, I heard something saying that Netflix is focusing more on second screen movies and like programs kind of thing like that. So it's like shows and movies that you can like have your phone out like scrolling through like your Instagram feed and stuff while also like watching this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that might be like kind of why a lot of movies are like falling flat.
That is honestly,
Um
I'd never heard that, and that is exactly how it feels. Like when you give your full
yeah,
attention to it, you're like, "What the hell? Like this is a waste of my time. Why am I watching
yeah,
this?"
So,
yeah.
I think Luca, it might be a little bit of both in terms of whether you're jaded or if things are really bad. I think I think there's a lot of films that are if there's like a Venn diagram of Luca and there's jaded and these films are legitimately bad. I think maybe like a tenth of the films that come out fall into that middle category of, or no, sorry, let me rephrase that. I'd say like 90% of films that come out fall into like, this is pretty bad. And maybe like 95 fall into like the middle. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mhm.
but I do think like obviously like you're not a huge fan of the Marvel universe, and this episode of Lords of Lore might be a little tough for you because part of my topic will have to do with that. But my thing is like I think almost we take the Marvel Cinematic Universe for granted because when I think about it, like I'm obviously like a big comic book fan, and if we're being like honest, in the course of film history, not only is this like a once in a lifetime thing that's happening and setting the bar moving forward, but also we gotta like this is the best adaptation probably ever made of any source material. Like I'd throw Lord of the Rings in the same conversation, but I don't know if there's ever been a property that's been adapted as well and been critically and community loved and appreciated and successful financially, critically. Like by all metrics, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the most successful film franchise of all time. And I don't think you get that by putting out mediocrity. Now, I will say, especially with the Marvel TV shows, the early Netflix ones, awful. Daredevil first 2 seasons. The first season was great. Second season, Everything past that is complete mediocrity. But I will say, Marvel does feel formulaic at times. And it feels like, okay, we have this character. It appeals to this demographic. It'll bring in this demographic, put out the movie. But I do think that takes away from all the hard work that goes into like the actors really giving their all to those roles, the writers who write a script that, even though like you might not feel drawn to it, you're like, oh, this is a Marvel movie. This is, all these things make sense and play into like this bigger, larger universe. I don't know if you could stamp mediocrity on setting up a 25 film franchise that's still expanding and going into the silver screen. Like for me, you don't get that sort of success from mediocrity. You do get it from, appealing to the widest demographic you possibly can, and making things inclusive for, a wider audience. But I don't think, like, maybe the stories, some of them feel like they're hitting the same beats, but they're comic book adaptations. All comic books have that.
Okay, so I agree with a lot of things you said. For one, what are they adapting? Like comic books, you have like 19 different starts to the Spider-Man story. Like how many versions of this story are there? Like any movie they make is an adaptation because it doesn't matter because it's a multiverse. Like
yes,
anything they make is a valid representation of the source material because it's just, there is no source material. It's just a character that has webs coming out of his wrists. Like that's the character.
But then would you say God of War is not an adaptation of Norse mythology?
What do you mean?
Like if God of War doesn't follow the same exact story as regular Norse mythology, right? It adapts it, it changes it, puts it into a new medium and tells a different story by changing characters, but it uses all the things that someone who's familiar with that would recognize.
Right, but are you really comparing the mythology of an entire culture over hundreds of years to comic books?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Honestly, yeah.
I know, but like, I don't see the comparison.
At least the stories. Yeah.
Like if you're saying it's the most successful source material adaptation, like there's only one Lord of the Rings. There's only one like the Wheel of Time series. There's only one set of Game of Thrones books. There's thousands and thousands of just Spider-Man stories.
Yeah.
So like in that sense, I don't think like it's, what are they adapting? Like they're making their own story. I don't know that it's the best source material adaptation that's ever been made. I would say that would probably be Lord of the Rings as of now. Maybe Dune will take that. But like right now, so I'm looking at all of the Marvel movies that have come out, and like I'm trying to think of like a moment that was like, wow, like that was just like that. This movie stuck with me for like long time, and I like none of them.
I mean, honestly, like, and I don't mean this to take away from your point here. Like that makes me sad because I feel like there are so many good moments in those movies that stick with me.
There are, but like I can't, like I'm looking at all of them right now, and I can't remember like a moment that I was like, yes, I remember seeing this movie, and like that was insane. Like I feel like every single one is just like, okay, this is a Marvel movie.
Like not even like Infinity War or like Endgame at all.
I mean, like just for example, Loki's death big, was pretty. Spikes. Was like, wow, he just broke Loki's neck until there's like erased that in the next movie, so it means nothing. Like,
oh, they didn't. Yeah. He doesn't come back actually.
Yeah, he does. He has a whole show. Like,
well, see, you gotta. I'll actually my segment today, spoilers, is gonna be about Loki.
Oh wow,
the character and the show. But it's not the same Loki that gets his neck snapped. It's like I'll get into it.
It doesn't matter. Like it that moment loses all of its weight when I see the exact same actor playing the exact same character again in the very next movie, and now he has a TV show. I don't like. You've lost me there. Like that moment loses all of its weight. Like if he's not gone forever, like what is the point of that moment? It was just like oh, you feel emotion, but we don't want to lose the character. Like we're gonna give him one of those non-permanent deaths, like they do to literally every single character they have.
Well, this comic books.
I know, and that's the thing. Like,
at the end of the day, comic books are the nerd soap opera where it's people are dying, always coming back, depending on who's writing, depending on who's doing everything. I forget who said it, but it was like, I think it was actually Stan Lee who had said it. It was like honestly, whoever like wins in a fight between like hero A or hero B. It's whoever it's the writer. The writer wins because it's up to him. He gets to decide. They get to decide who takes that win kind of thing. So it's very much just like because there are so many writers like coming at all of this source material and everything, like it's getting handed off like by this person to this person to this person. I think that's kind of like why comic books in general like feel kind of like there's that monotony to it. But yeah, there's definitely like the outliers in comics, at least I find. And same with the movies. Like I recently saw Eternals. I think that was a really cool film that they did like interesting things. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, so I won't like spoil anything because it's pretty yeah, like interesting. Like for me coming from like a like semi-religious upbringing, like it hit like a lot of like religious trauma kind of points throughout the film, which I found that felt very different from like a Marvel movie. So I think that's why that movie has stuck with me at least. So yeah, I don't know. At least with Marvel films, I'm pretty big fan of.
And you know what the other thing is, what you said, Matt, we take them for granted. I actually almost feel the opposite. I'm a little bit disappointed that this exists because it is so successfly, and because every single film studio is like, wow, look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, look at the billions that they're making. Let's do the same thing. And it's just like everybody does it so badly.
But but that's what I mean though, is like Marvel has done it right, and it's not
what they've done is lowered the bar for creativity all around, because like everybody's like, let's just make a cinematic universe of whatever.
But look how many cinematic universes have failed, right? Because it's not just that Marvel did it first; it's that they did it right.
They did it kind of They like set up individual characters, then brought them together, and they're probably going to do it again. Like they're going to start making individual movies and do another collaborative movie. But like, it's kind of like I'm getting very tired of it, and I'm sick of seeing 25 superhero movies come out every year, and that's where all the funding for film is going. And it's like, where is like a cool movie that does something other than here's a superhero, here's a villain with the exact same powers, guess who wins at the end? Like, oh, I wonder.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think like when we talk about things like Dune, right? Obviously, like it's a different type of movie that I think maybe it has some crossover audiences like us, like myself. Whereas like I'm into Dune for the sci-fi aspects, but also like the philosophical questions and the questions it asks about society. Whereas you're not getting as much of that in Marvel films, but there still is element, like every writer who's wrote for Marvel, there's obviously story beats you have to hit so that it's a Marvel movie. But also like when you talk about
exactly my point.
Yeah, but when you talk about things like Black Panther, like Shang-Chi, where like these films are important not only because they serve a purpose in this film universe, but also like outwards, like in the real world, like this is like representation and we're telling stories of people who really exist in, the real world type of thing. I think those stories are just as important. Whereas Dune, like I understand why Dune's important and I love all the reasons that like the philosophical questions Dune forces you to ask yourself. Things like Blade Runner as well fit into that category for me. But I just like, you can't deny that like not everybody wants to go see Blade Runner or wants to go see Dune. Do I agree with those people? No. I wish more people enjoyed them. But it's just the reality of it, right? Like it's easier to sell people on Iron Man. And I guess the funny thing about the Marvel Cinematic Universe too is to go see Avengers, that takes so much buy-in. You got to watch 20 movies, and people do. Like I'd say like the percentage of people who went into that movie without previously having seen the majority or all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is probably like 20% or lower. I'm just guessing, but I would guess like it's probably around that number because like you want to know what's happening. It's like Cam, you said, like it's a soap opera basically at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't think that makes it inherently bad, but I do think it brings along with it the formulaic approach that can get sort of.
It just with the fact that it's what's dominating all box office. Every single major studio is like, let's make the Marvel movies. And it's like, we've seen those movies. Marvel's made 30 of them and they're all pretty much the same. Like they're all like, I'm not saying they're all like, none of them are bad movies. That's the thing. Like they're not bad. Like Shang-Chi wasn't a bad movie. It was just a little underwhelming, It was just like, okay, I've seen this movie. Like Like, sure, now it's like the 10 rings instead of with like very ambiguous powers. Like, it's kind of cool. Special effects are good. Actors are great. Music is great. Like, it's always like Marvel's always good in those. Special effects, always great. Music is always solid. The actors are always charismatic. They're good. Like I enjoy all those aspects. I've seen this movie. Like, take a risk, you know? Like, you already made your billions. Like how many hundreds of billions has Marvel made? Like, take one risk. Make one sort of out there movie. Like, just like, I don't know, break the mold a little.
Yeah, I think what they consider risk is so much less risky than what we might consider, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Like, so, I think for them, a risk was like Black Panther. And I like, it hurts for me to say that because I know why they think that, and it's not okay. But like, you know, or Shang-Chi to them would probably be a risk as well. But
so was Black Widow for the same
for the same reasons. Exactly, yeah. And you know, you see like not Shang-Chi or Black Panther, but like the sort of vitriol that something like Black Widow gets met with. Like, I understand as a business why they don't, but I feel like you're saying, Luca, when you have that much power and that much success, you sort of need to take risks because then you run into like getting too predictable or like generic.
Like, Disney can afford the L of one movie that like doesn't really perform to the $1.5 billion like box office level, you know?
Yeah,
it's like,
they did. It's called Solo.
Yeah. Man, I like Solo.
I love Solo.
Ooh, I hated that movie.
Yeah, but also like talking about risks, like Blade Runner 2049, huge risk, $200 million movie that we know of, probably more. $11 million opening weekend. That's a career ender in most cases. Denis Villeneuve comes with, you know, Denis Villeneuve, but even that failure was so much so that they didn't greenlight a second Dune movie until, you know, a week or so after the first one had released. Like, that's a major setback. The company who made that movie is like still struggling, if they haven't folded already. Like,
I mean, yeah, but that was like a very good example of a terrible marketing campaign that just like buried a movie by not promoting it.
I think that's another big thing as to why we're not seeing very many like actual like films. Like, I know that when Dune came out, I think Timothée Chalamet had like another movie come out like in the same weekend, and I saw no advertising for anything like that. And maybe it's just like my algorithm on like Instagram or whatever is just like pumping me full of like what's Marvel sending out next kind of thing, or like it's just like I don't get enough of that like advertising for like actual movies. Not that these movies aren't actual movies, but you know what I mean.
I think especially when we're talking about fantasy and sci-fi, those have to be big budget movies. It's so hard to do those movies and for them to turn out good when it's a lower budget. And so when you talk about things like independent studios who are taking like super big risks with movies all the time, they can't really tell those stories because it's like, even like something like The Green Knight, like that's a huge risk of a movie and gets critically like flamed, like, or at least by audiences gets flamed for being like too hard to comprehend or like, you know, too slow. And it's like, well, then, you know, studios aren't going to take more risks with movies like that or telling that type of story because it's like, it didn't work, you know?
That's exactly. I'm just lamenting the fact that this is what works. Like, this is what makes the billions. And I mean, it's not, there's no bad Marvel movies. That's the thing. They're all in that nice medium. Like, the best Marvel movies are like B pluses, you know, like the worst are like,
I don't know about that.
C pluses. I mean, which one would you call like a 9 out of 10 Marvel movie?
For me, I put Black Panther in that category. And then,
but why? Like, because
it's important
exactly. Not because it's a good movie,
but also because it's a good movie. I think it's well acted. I think the story is perfect. But
well, perfect? It was not remotely close to perfect. Like,
what? I don't know. I would, to me, I would put it in a 9 out of 10. I would also put Endgame in that same category as well. Just the spectacle of it, I think, is probably one of the greatest films ever made. Not in a
it was cool special
philosophical change my outlook on the world, but just like
it was a cool movie experience, no question.
Yeah.
I mean, they're doing that's what they're doing now. They're even for the new Spider-Man. How many villains have they announced? 7 or 8 already? Like,
Yeah.
Like,
See,
that's where
and
the budget is going.
and that's like, again, because they're comic book movies, that's a comic book approach. How do we get more people to buy this comic? We tell them that there's 6 characters showing up. It's a crossover event of the universe. There's a crossover event every like 4 years in comic books, and it's been that way since like the 70s. Like,
Yeah.
and we're getting it on film now. So like,
Maybe the moral of the story is I just don't care about comics books at all. Like,
yeah, and you even said, like, I can't remember what episode we were talking about this, but like, because there's a multiverse, like, you're not really into multiverses. You like,
no. I like a story.
You should watch Loki. You should watch it. Anyways,
That'll do it for me on my rant on the mediocrity of cinema.